Over the past couple weeks on my channel, which is called The Practical Poet, I have been doing what I've been calling a challenge, but it's really not a challenge. I've been calling it a modern versus classical poetry challenge. It was really just a way to see if viewers out there were drawn more to classical poetry or if they preferred more modern day or more contemporary. You can probably tell by my channel name, The Practical Poet, that I'm drawn more to the modern day. But I have been discovering through this challenge that it's really not so much when the poem is written, but how it was written that I'm drawn to. So there's a lot of classical poetry out there that tells a bit of a story. When you think about Edgar Allan Poe and The Raven, or "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," which was written in 1863, and they both tell a bit of a story. And I'm really drawn to that. And my tagline on my channel is actually storytelling through poetry. So I wanted to get a feel to see what viewers were more drawn to. And I didn't really get many comments. I got a couple of thumbs up, so which I greatly appreciate. But my hope was that if I got a lot of comments that people were really drawn to the more modern day or contemporary, my plan was to say, come on over, check out my channel. I've got a lot of modern day poetry that you might prefer. So I still hoping that people, appreciate poetry for no matter when it was written, or if it's classical versus modern, or even now we have something called ultra modern, which is more like insta poetry, and that's just short lines that don't necessarily rhyme, and it's just kind of 5 or 6 lines, typically accompanied by a pencil sketch to illustrate the poem, and that's becoming very popular right now as well. So I've really been enjoying this. I've been enjoying delving a little bit more into the classical, which I tended to avoid because I don't always understand it. Uses a lot of big words, some old English sometimes, and I still do struggle with that a little bit when I'm reading some of the poems that I'm trying to pick out for this challenge. And I'm kind of like, I'm not sure what this is referring to, or what this word means, or things like that. But that does happen sometimes with the classical as well. I subscribe to poets.org, I think it is, and they send me a poem a day into my email, and sometimes they were recently written, and I'm still quite not quite sure what the poem is about, and that's a modern day poem. So I guess, like I said, I have learned through this challenge that it's not so much when it was written, but rather how it was written. And I do prefer the storytelling. I am drawn more to poems that rhyme. That is my typical way that I write my poems. And so I'm drawn to that with the same type of poetry. I really do like the 4 line verse with a little bit of rhyming and a little bit of storytelling. You may feel differently. You may like all kinds, whether or not they rhyme, whether or not they tell a story. Everybody's drawn to different things. And so again, the point is that I really am enjoying this challenge, and I'm trying to get myself to look at poetry in a different way, and maybe explore different types of poetry. So even though I've been having fun with this week's topic is not so fun. I've been only featuring 2 poems per week. This week, I actually have 3 poems that I want to talk about. One from the classical era, one from the mid 70s, so kind of right in between that time period, about 40, 50 years ago, and then a more recent one from 2023. So kind of hitting, the classical. I think this first one was written in 1800, or published in early 1900s, and then 1976, and then recently. So this is not a very fun topic, though. This is a topic that has to do with suicide. And so if that is a sensitive topic for you, if you've been impacted by that, then maybe you might want to pass on this video and check out one of my other challenge videos. I have been impacted by suicide. My best friend, her husband took his life in a very tragic and kind of violent way, and I'm still seeing the ripple effects of that a couple years later. So I know that this is a very sensitive topic. And in the video, if you see me smile or you see me laugh, please know that I'm not being insensitive. I understand the brevity of this topic, and I'm not trying to ever, laugh or make it comical or anything like that. Just maybe a way to maybe relax a little bit on a heavier topic. So with that, I want to go ahead and get into the reading of the first poem. I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit differently. Recently, on the other videos, I would read both poems first and then go back and talk about each one. I'm going to go ahead and just pause after each one and give my thoughts on it, and then move on to the next one. So I'm going to go ahead and take a quick sip of tea here. Very cold day today, but the sun is shining brightly. I'm looking out at a blue sky above me, so all good. And it's a Friday too, so hey, even better. So I'm going to go ahead and put my glasses on. And this first poem is called Suicide in the Trenches. And it is by a poet by the name of Siegfried Sassoon. And I'm going to go ahead and read this. This is a very short poem. It's only 3 verses. So typically I only read a small excerpt from each poem. But because this one is only the 3 verses, I'm going to go ahead and read the whole thing. It is a bit shocking, so brace yourself. Suicide in the Trenches. I knew a simple soldier boy who grinned at life in empty joy, slept soundly through the lonesome dark, and whistled early with the lark. In wintered trenches, cowed and glum, with crumps and lice and lack of rum, he put a bullet through his brain. No one spoke of him again. You smug-faced crowds with kindling eye, who cheer when soldier lads march by, sneak home and pray you'll never know the hell where youth and laughter go. Wow, that was deep. That was heavy. So again, Suicide in the Trenches by Siegfried Sassoon. He he was born in 1886, died in 1967. This poem was published in February 23rd, 1918 in Cambridge Magazine, and then he put it in his collection, Sassoon's collection, called Counterattack and Other Poems. A little bit about him. This is from allpoetry.com. He was an English poet, a writer, and a soldier decorated for bravery in World War One. He was known for poems that his poems were known for their unflinching honesty. And this is a brutal poem that exposes, the horrors that these soldiers face in the trenches. This poem had a little bit of a disconnect between the enthusiastic support of the young soldiers as they're first going off to war, and then the harsh realities that they will face once they are in the trenches. He talks about in this poem about the smug-faced crowds that cheer when the soldiers march by. And he says, snake home and pray you'll never know the hell where youth and laughter go. So, if you've ever been in a parade of soldiers when they come home, or, any kind of like applause that we give them and stuff, I hope that they appreciate our support, but we don't really know what they have gone through, what they've seen, and I'm sure that they've seen things that we can't even imagine, and they've lived and slept in places that it sounds like our worst nightmare, and yet they do it to protect us, and because it's what they signed up to do, but we don't really know. And even recently, even though there hasn't been a major war like World War One, World War Two, thankfully, soldiers that are coming back from Iraq, Afghanistan, there's a lot of soldier suicide that still goes on there. There's actually an organization called Stop Soldier Suicide, which I have donated to. It's a very wonderful cause, and there is a lot of support out there for them, and I hope that they reach out. PTSD is a very real thing. It states on here that even though he was a decorated war hero, but he did eventually oppose the war. But even though he opposed the war, he never lost his respect and admiration for his fellow soldiers. So he did, support the soldiers that were out there fighting with him. He just didn't agree with World War One. And it talks about, the stark language that he uses emphasizes the violent and dehumanizing conditions, contrasting sharply with the idealistic glorification of war. So he was really coming for those that supported the war, the politics and that, like stuff like that, not so much his fellow soldiers. And so a little fact on that too, there's an English rock star. I had never really heard of him, but his name was Pete Doherty, of a band called the Libertines. And he set this poem to music. And he's often performs it at his live performances. So that would be an interesting song to hear put to music. Very dark and deep poem. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and move into the next poem. Like I mentioned here, this poem was set to music. And I always say that when it comes to song lyrics, I featured a song in my first challenge video, and that song was called Lion Eyes by the Eagles. And that is actually a poem set to music that tells a story about a young woman cheating on her older husband, the man with hands as cold as ice. I just love that line, and and this is a little bit along those same lines. I'm not going to tell you the name. I want you to see, especially if you're a classic rock lover like I am, if you recognize the words of this poem set to music, is what I'm going to call it, and then we'll talk about it afterward. Love of two is one, here, but now they're gone. Came the last night of sadness. It was clear she couldn't go on. Then the door was open and the wind appeared. The candles blew and then disappeared. The curtains flew and then he appeared, saying, "Don't be afraid." So if you recognize those lyrics, you're probably familiar with the upcoming line that says, "Don't be afraid, don't fear the reaper." So this was a song by the band Blue Oyster Cult. This was recorded in 1976. It appeared on their Agents of Fortune album. That was a platinum selling album that peaked on number 29 of the US Billboard charts. And this particular song peaked at number 12 on the Billboard Hot 100 singles, making it Blue Oyster Cult's biggest hit. The reason that I really liked some of the lyrics on here, I've known this song for forever. I mean, since it first came out, and I never really paid that much attention to the lyrics. And then one day I really sat down and I really started listening to them, and I was like, whoa, these are some really interesting lyrics here. So I did a little bit of digging into this. So the lead singer name is Donald Rosser. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, but he actually goes by the name of Buck Dharma. And he states that he wrote this poem, I'm so sorry, he wrote this song while he was thinking of his own mortality. He had been diagnosed with an irregular heartbeat or an arrhythmia or something like that. And he started thinking about his own mortality, and he started thinking about what would happen if he were to die at a very young age. And that kind of spurred this song. He states that it's basically, this came from Wikipedia. He states that it's basically a love song. This is a quote. It's basically a love song where love transcends the actual physical existence of the partners, unquote. So in other words, it's a poem about love never dies. Love lives on. So if you have a partner or husband, wife that have passed on, that love still goes on. He talks about how this song is about the inevitability of death and the foolishness of fearing it. And it was written when Dharma was thinking about what would happen if he died at a young age, like I just mentioned. But there's a little bit of controversy about that, because a lot of people, and to be honest, myself included, really think this poem is about suicide. I really do think it's about a suicide pact, and you're free to think otherwise. I always say poetry and songs are open to interpretation, and he even states that on here. He includes a quote on here that I'm going to talk about in a moment, where he talks about how their work, Blue Oyster Cult's music, is open to interpretation. But going back to some of the reasons why do I think this is about suicide, and many people think this is about suicide. I didn't read this line, but there is a line on here, Romeo and Juliet are together in eternity. And then he talks about 40,000 men and women every day, like Romeo and Juliet. 40,000 men and women every day redefine happiness. Another 40,000 coming every day. We can be like they are. And in I forgot, I'll have to find my source, but I don't think it was Wikipedia that stated this, but there was an interview, I think it was AmericanSongwriter.com, where I was wondering what that 40,000 men and women represented. And he said that that was his guess on how many people died every day. And then in the article, it corrected it to be more like 140,000 died per day in 1976. So he was a little bit off in his number there. But again, talking about that death, and the Romeo and Juliet reference really made people think that this was a bit of a suicide pact. And then, he's kind of beckoning her to come to him. So when Buck Dharma, the lead singer who wrote these lyrics, when he found out that this was a song, that people thought it was a song about suicide, he was really taken aback by that. And according to AmericanSongwriter.com, this was appalling to him. He had no idea that people thought that this was about suicide. And he said it's probably due to the Romeo and Juliet reference. And he quoted, quoting him here, he says, it's not about suicide, although people kind of get that from the Romeo and Juliet reference. Unquote. And he goes on to say that Blue Oyster Cult's lyrics have always been deep, not obtuse, and open to interpretation. He states that they purposely do that, leave it open to interpretation to let people draw their own conclusions. So I wonder if he wasn't doing a little bit of backpedaling there, if maybe it was about suicide, and maybe when he learned how deeply people were taking those words, he thought, oh, I better back this down a little bit and just say, no, it's not. It's about how love transcends death and how you don't have to fear death and you can welcome it, if you will. I'm not so sure. I still think that that there's a bit of a suicide pact here or a suicide reference. Um, and that comes from a lot of the last verse. And I didn't read this part either. Like I mentioned, I'm not reading everything, but I kind of am reading everything now, right? Um, so after the door was open and the curtains blew and the candles dimmed, saying "Don't be afraid," the next verse states, "Come on, baby," and she had no fear. She ran to him. Then they started to fly. They looked backward and said goodbye. She had become like they are. She had taken his hand. She had become like they are. Come on, baby, don't fear the reaper. So it states to me like something or someone was beckoning her to come to them. And they only say the word, she ran to him. And so I'm assuming it was her lover. And the thing that I'm thinking about as I was reading these lyrics was her lover in spirit form? Had he already taken his life? Was he like Romeo, who took his life first and then was kind of beckoning her in spirit form, saying, "Come on with me"? I kind of think that's maybe the way that I'm interpreting it. Again, you can interpret it a little bit differently, but that whole thing about him beckoning her, saying, "Don't be afraid." And then the other thing I thought was maybe the person beckoning her is the Reaper himself, saying, "Don't be afraid of me. Don't fear the Reaper. I'm here for you. It's your time." But the Reaper would be referring to himself in first person, which I think would be a little bit weird. So I think it was actually like her lover killed himself first and was saying, "Come with me, don't be afraid, we can be like they are." And who are the they? Well, the only they that I have reference to are the 40,000 men and women every day, like Romeo and Juliet. So I think that there are a lot of suicide references in here. The lead singer can choose to state otherwise, or maybe do a little bit of backpedaling, or I don't want to accuse anybody of writing something that they didn't intend to. So maybe he did intend for it to be, the poem about don't fear death, don't fear the reaper. It's going to happen to all of us. It's nothing to be afraid of. But I do feel like there is a bit of a suicide message in here, not promoting suicide by any means, but I do think that it is a little bit about I just get the impression maybe a suicide pact, maybe two people, that are choosing to leave this world together. Especially, they said they looked backward and said goodbye. She had taken his hand. Come on, baby, don't fear the reaper. So, very, very classic. Very classic song from a classic rock song from the mid 70s. I grew up with this song. I love it. It's one of my favorite songs. And it even made its way onto Saturday Night Live in a fun little skit. If you remember the "We Need More Cowbell," that was done to this song. So a lot of history with this song. Let me know in the comments if you are familiar with this song, if you what you think of the lyrics as well, or if you agree more with the lead singer that it's just a song about not fearing death. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the last poem. This is a poem called "Darkness." And I'm just going to read a couple of verses from this poem. This is from 2023. And, oh, I've grabbed the wrong book. Give me just a moment. I have to find the right book that has this poem in there. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is a poem. Let me put this one down because that's confusing me. Okay, again, this is called "Darkness" from 2023. I wish you had reached out to me. I wish that I had known how life was leaving you. feeling desperate and alone. I wish that I had been there. I wish I still could be. But the darkness that encompassed you stole you away from me. The shadows that surrounded you swallowed you like a cloud. I wish that you had said something or shouted it out loud. For people tend to get caught up in their daily world. It's hard sometimes to notice when another's life has unfurled. So that was just a few verses of the poem Darkness. This is actually one of mine. This is from my third book called Gather Seeds of Hope. And this is, again, kind of like the song that I just talked about. I want to leave it open to interpretation for the reader. So it doesn't really state whether or not the person in this poem that they're talking to has committed suicide or not. The last line, you can draw your own conclusions to that. I didn't read that here, but this is more from the perspective of somebody who has lost somebody or is very close to losing somebody to suicide, and they're asking kind of the universe at large, like, what could I have done differently? I wish that I had been there for you. I wish that I had, dropped everything. And later on in the poem, it states, if I could go back in time, I'd knock on your front door. I'd make a nuisance of myself so you could not ignore. And kind of talks about taking the responsibility, and that's the real tragedy in suicide, isn't it? Of course, we miss the person that chose to take their own life. We wish, against all wishes, that it had never happened. But the real tragedy is with the people that are left behind, and sometimes some anger. There's a lot of anger for the person that did that to my best friend and her daughter. I was swearing curse words up and down at him for a long time, and it's not that I'm not sympathetic. I can be sympathetic to somebody who's in a lot of pain and wish that pain would go away. Um, and I can feel for somebody who is in that deep and dark of a place that they feel that that's their only option. But when they leave this world by their own hand, it's those that are left behind that really do the suffering. And in this poem here, that's the main point. This person is suffering because they've lost somebody, or they will lose somebody quickly or soon. I'm not going to tell the ending. I'll leave that open to the reader. But it's again somebody that's suffering and saying, what did I miss something? Could I have done something? Did I miss the signs? Was I not there for you? We often say, I'm here for you, but a lot of times, we get wrapped up in our own lives, and we let people know, like, hey, I'm here for you. But we don't constantly keep checking up on somebody. We can't do that. We have our own lives. It's not like we can be texting them 24/7, and that would just be irritating as well. So we let people know, like, hey, I'm here for you. If you need anything, let me know. I'll be there in a second. And it's kind of up to them to let us know. And sometimes they don't. And we carry that burden with us, and unfortunately, that it's a heavy burden to carry. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I've been going a little bit longer than I planned. So again, this last poem was recently from 2023 in my book, Gather Seeds of Hope. I have not yet done a video poetry reading. If you're familiar with my channel, or if you visit it, each week I do a video poetry reading from one of my 4 books, or even some new material. And I also have a blog of the same name at thepracticalpoet.com/blog. You can read the poem Darkness there on my blog under the poem Darkness. And it also has links to my books. There's a books tab, but I haven't yet gotten around to doing a video poetry reading of Darkness. It is on my list. So when I get done with that video, I will link it to this video so you can read the ending and draw your own interpretation. So I hope that you enjoyed this poetry reading. I know it was a little bit deeper and darker of a topic. Dealing with suicide is never an easy topic, and I hope that nobody is offended or walks away here feeling, kind of down. But I hope that you took something away from each of those poems. And, again, just kind of a public service announcement. There's always resources to help if you know somebody that is in such a dark place and you feel like it's beyond your means to help them. There's always resources out there. So I hope that you or they reach out when you need that assistance. So with that, if you like this video poetry reading, and or not video poetry reading, this poetry challenge, and you want to be notified the next time I do one, which I do post, trying to post these once a week, but maybe every other week or once a month. But at any rate, please like and subscribe, and you will be notified the next time that I post a video poetry challenge. So with that, it is Friday. I am off to enjoy a nice glass of wine and some cheese and kick off the weekend. So happy Super Bowl weekend. In the United States. So I don't watch, but if you do, I hope that you enjoy. And if you don't watch, maybe find some free time while your spouse or friends or whatever are watching the game and read some poetry. So thanks so much. We'll chat soon. Bye.